Well, this week we're looking at AI's potential impact on politics. It's a very wide field, and it's a very varied field. AI will have an impact on politics, and some of that impact will be global. And that is because of the internet, which is another story. The distribution of AI generated content is already flooding the internet, flooding the world's computers, being read by or at least glanced at by millions upon millions of people. So that's a thing already, I'm sure. The internet, I mean, I think that the whole story of the internet and its impact on the human condition, human consciousness, is a story that we still haven't really told to ourselves. Um, there's a thinker behind this, at least my approach to computer ethics, and that's Marshall McLuhan. He became very famous in the 1960s for saying that the medium is the message, and trying to figure out the impacts on human consciousness, the human way of life, the human condition of electronic media, which at that time was radio and television. And it was groundbreaking, and it's impossible, at least with older people, to talk about Marshall McLuhan because he was so famous at one time and then sort of dropped off the map, maybe because of overexposure. And there's a very famous scene in a Woody Allen movie where he makes a cameo appearance, and everyone remembers that and laughs at it, and then stops listening to you if you try to talk about Marshall McLuhan. But he was a very important thinker, in my opinion. And there really has been no thinker of that stature and creativity who has explained to us how the computer age has affected human consciousness, and especially the internet has affected human consciousness. I mean, I've taught this course many times, and I've included stuff that's tried to make a start, but nothing really of much substance. But it's worth looking at. It's worth thinking about. Um, so here, particularly, it's impossible to separate AI from the internet. Is what I'm trying to say. There would be an impact from artificial intelligence, even if there were no World Wide Web. But because there is a World Wide Web, the impact will be much more immediate, is much more immediate. Imagine that there was this thing called ChatGPT that you could use to write your papers for you, or do your work, or do your coding, but you had to pay $79.99 for it and order the CD. People, of course, would pirate it, but it'd be a different sort of thing. But now it's just there on your screen at this point for nothing, at least the free version of ChatGPT. So yeah, we're talking about politics and specifically the use of AI in politics, and it will be varied. It will be different in the democracies as opposed to the authoritarian regimes, and I think that's something we have to speak of frankly. I mean, every modern democracy is flawed, from the United States to the UK to France to Brazil to Sweden to Japan, but they are democracies and they are more or less free societies. You and I can say whatever we want. I can make this course however I want. I can criticize the government. I will, if you ask me, criticize the government. Um, and then there are authoritarian regimes, places like China and Russia, which are different from each other, but are definitely authoritarian in that there is no real freedom of speech. There are no liberal principles governing the country. The country's not governed by laws, it's governed by power. I mean, it's the threat of Trump. I mean, be frank. I mean, it could happen here very quickly. If a man like Trump were to get everything that he wanted, he would get a tyranny, an authoritarian government. And we don't want that to happen. And AI is the kind of power and force that could make things like that happen. We're looking at different things. We're looking at how AI could influence elections, but we're also looking at how AI can be used for repressive means. One of the things that's there's so many tragedies in our world, the global world, human rights disasters. That it's hard even to keep up with them. But one continuing one is the repression of the Uyghurs in China, an ethnic minority in a certain region of China, which is essentially being wiped out um, by the Chinese government, which is a repressive, authoritarian government. China is ruled by with an iron hand by the Chinese Communist Party, and that's just a fact, right? And one of the most impressive uses of digital technology and AI now in our world is how it's being used in China and throughout the whole country, especially in I can't remember the region. I'll mispronounce it or I'll get it wrong. The region where the Uyghurs live, there's a level of repression there, of surveillance, really, that would not be possible without digital technology and would not be possible without artificial intelligence, and will become even more repressive and powerful in the coming years. So it's an issue that each one of us has to deal with because as a responsible person, you care. As a responsible, educated, literate person, you care what happens in China. You care what happens in Gaza. You care what happens in Myanmar or wherever the oppression or violence is taking place. No matter what you think of those places, is up to you entirely. I mean, I'm not God. I would never impose my opinion on any of those things, anybody. But there are certain facts that need to be taken into account, and AI will be used, is being used, and will be used to make repression more powerful. And we have to think about that as free people, how we're going to deal with that situation.